morning when we're praying, I think nerves are a good thing and probably a healthy thing, but something about what I want to share this morning. I feel nervous about what I'm sharing, or I feel like all week I had a direction of travel that I thought Romans 12 verse 11 was taking us in, and I think it will at some stage, but I just kept being drawn back to a couple of lines in Isaiah 42, which I'll get to. So just, I don't know whether it feels a bit more like timely or what it is. So let me pray. Father, thank you for what we've sang this morning. Thank you for the intention, the desire to try to turn our eyes towards Jesus, to remember. You're the reason why we're here, Jesus. And I pray by your Spirit you would come and illuminate our hearts and our minds, that you would come and bring comfort and peace, that you would even stir conviction and challenge. I pray that you would open our eyes and our ears to what you would want to say to us, of course as individuals, but what you want to say to us as a family this morning. So in these moments of opening your word together, I pray that we would just know the sense of your presence with us. God, I pray that in my weakness, that you'd use whatever I have to say to bring glory to your name. God, anything that is just of me, I pray that by your Spirit, God, it would be forgotten, it would be cast aside. We pray that your life would be known and evidenced through what we share and hear this morning. Romans 12 verse 11, conscious again that all our different versions will translate it slightly differently. It says in my version, never lacking in zeal, keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. And so over the last number of months, we've talked about offering ourselves as living sacrifice. We've talked about being transformed by the renewing of our minds. We've talked about the importance of the gifts that we have been given, that your contribution is essential to the life of the body of Christ. And we've talked about loving the good, clinging to the good. We've talked about loving with genuine love, with the genuine love of Christ. And last week talked about that being expressed in honouring ways that show and make evidence the value of each person. And so it's the essential fact of the love of God that brings us even to this verse, that without the essential fact of the love of God, it is not possible to remain zealous. It is not possible to remain fervent. It is his love that sustains. It is his love that fuels passion. And so in my mind this morning, when I knew that we were going to be speaking about remaining zealous, remaining passionate, keeping the fire lit, keeping your spiritual fervour, I imagined that it would be with the same level of enthusiasm that Neville was speaking about the women, announcing the women's time tomorrow night, whatever enthusiasm he tries to bring. And part of me thinks that actually that idea, that side of the coin, probably better being done by David or somebody a bit more zealous, maybe a bit more fervent. But I still anticipated that that's the line I would go down, but I couldn't help but kept being drawn back to the idea of what happens when the zeal wanes. What happens when the fire feels like it's nothing but a flicker. I kept being drawn to that. I couldn't get away from that, so I do think it's important, and hopefully you'll find the same, that is the line that I want to go down this morning. So which I'm rubbish at trying to come up with a title for what I'm wanting to share, but what I want you to go away with this morning is just the tenderness of Jesus. To be incredibly conscious. That has just been my prayer. Whatever words come out of my mouth, more than anything, that you would know, you would experience, that you would live with an understanding of the gentleness and the tenderness of Jesus. Proverbs 18, verse 14. We've been praying loads, increasingly it feels like, for people sick in their bodies. Proverbs 18, verse 14 says, a man's spirit can sustain him in sickness, but a crushed or a wounded spirit who can bear? And I've been amazed as I reflect on the people that we have prayed for with like horrendous physical sickness. There's been something inspiring about how they've been able to sustain themselves, how they've been able to sustain a level of faith and a level of clinging on to hope in spite of what seems like incredibly wounded, sick bodies. There's something about this, and I think the writer of the Proverbs is saying that can happen. Something within us can sustain a wounded body. But who can bear? Who can bear a wounded spirit? So what do we do when there's this, maybe the loss of passion, the loss of energy? I think that's what we think of, I imagine. It's what I think of when I think of a wounded spirit. A loss of energy, a loss of this zeal, a loss of this fervency. And we don't have time this morning, and I hope in conversation, as maybe that something opens in our hearts or even opens in conversation, that there'll be all sorts of reasons why we have found ourselves where not just brokenness in our body, but maybe even worse. A wounded spirit coming from emotional brokenness, maybe rejection, maybe a conflict in relationship, maybe a guilty conscience, maybe a misplaced hope. I'm sure that we could no exhaustive list of how you would find yourself in a place where it feels like you're not just wounded in body, but maybe even worse, wounded in spirit. And I think my bias towards this direction of travel this morning has been from a devotion that I shared with William and a few others a number of Sunday mornings ago. And I keep coming back to it. And every time I think I've moved on from it, William brings me back to it. And it's a devotion I get every morning from Father Richard Rohr, and over Easter he'd penned a devotional on the story of Thomas and Jesus' response to Thomas's doubt when he says, essentially, look at my wounds. And there's an intimacy, what Richard Rohr went on to write was there is an intimacy to Jesus' command to Thomas, a closeness that we cannot overlook. Christ invites him to touch the unhealed wounds, to feel the places where nails and spear had pierced his body. It is a proclamation that the physical body still matters. Wounds too are a part of the divine story. By sharing his wounds, Jesus reveals that our wounds are places for God's healing presence and love. This is a theology for the wounded, for those who are still healing, even for those who aren't quite ready for healing. The risen Saviour insistently welcomes the doubting, the uncertain, and the grieving to touch and see that he is real and present and here with us. A wounded people encased in the frailties of human flesh, can we too summon enough grace and kindness to acknowledge that our very own human wounds need time to heal? This is an embodied theology. In these stories, the physical body and the tangible world are consistently presented as ways of intimately knowing God. Some saw and believed, and others have not seen and still believed. The center of both experiences is God in flesh, loving us in our own wounded places. And I know that's a lot there. I was trying to leave bits out, but I couldn't. But I've just been drawn to that. I've been drawn to that idea of bringing our wounds almost to the wounds of Jesus. That seemed to happen with Thomas. He was wounded in spirit. He was crushed. All his hope, everything that he had dreamed of, had plans and ambitions for, was crushed in the death of Jesus. And Jesus invites him to bring his wounded, crushed spirit to the wounds of Jesus. And I don't know exactly how it happens, but there's something about Jesus placing his wounded hands on our bruised, wounded spirits that healing begins. And there's just something about that image that and maybe it feels like it's a long way off from Romans 12 verse 11, but it's something about that just stirred within me this idea of just presenting and wanting to present again and again the gentleness and the tenderness of the wounded hands of Jesus being placed in our bruised hearts, our wounded spirits. And I don't know how long it happens, and I don't know how exactly it happens, but it does seem to be the place where healing begins. And it's Isaiah verse 42, as I said at the start, it's Isaiah verse 42, verse 3, that it feels like it's been the only verse, it's been the only thought in my mind all week. Anytime I read something else or try to engage with something else, I keep being drawn back to Isaiah 42, verse 3. And again, with this deep desire that would be the experience for all of us, that you would know and experience the tenderness of Jesus. Maybe when the zeal is waning, or the fervency or the fire, it feels like nothing but a smouldering wick, that you would know and experience something of what was prophesied about Jesus. Here is my servant whom I uphold, my chosen one in whom I delight. I will put my spirit on him, and he will bring justice to the nations. He will not shout or cry out or raise his voice in the streets. A bruised reed he will not break. And a smouldering wick he will not snuff out. Bruised reed he will not break, and a smouldering wick he will not snuff out. I feel like if I read it louder, I'll get through this. So my deep desire, is that we would be able to bring our bruised reeds to the tenderness of Jesus. If you feel this morning that there is little smoke left in the wick, if you've read on to Romans 12, verse 11, I think there's moments where maybe I did read on and felt like I keep the fire lit, keep going. And if I'm being really honest, there's been moments where being consumed by what is going on in our world, that it feels like when it comes to faith, there's just a smouldering wick that's left. And maybe I just needed to hear that from me, but I'm really hoping that whenever it's not easy, when it's not easy to maintain vibrant faith, when it feels like there is little smoke on the wick, the tenderness of Jesus says a bruised reed he will not break, a smouldering wick he will not put out. And what I valued as I continued to ponder this was this story in Mark chapter 9. Where this young boy has been troubled by this spirit, and his dad is desperate for him to be set free. And he comes to Jesus and says, "If you can do this, will you heal my boy?" And Jesus looks, if I can, everything is possible for him who believes. And there's something about sometimes we can miss this. We get caught up in the story of the healing, and that's good to do that. But the boy's dad said immediately, "I do believe, but help my unbelief." And I feel like that's been so much my prayer. So I think of people, messages this week from people who just like what sickness is doing to their bodies. When I hear reports of people like right on the front line of war that is destroying the most innocent parts of humanity, and I come to pray and I feel like this smouldering wick, I want to believe. God, help me in my unbelief. And I've just come to the place this week because of the tenderness of Jesus, because he's just continued to impress upon me his tenderness and his gentleness, that is enough. I believe, but help me in my unbelief. That's enough. I want to believe. That's enough. I want to all the other things that we've talked about this over the last couple of months. I want to love genuinely. Well, that's enough. I want to be transformed. I want my mind to be transformed. Well, that's enough. Bring the smouldering wick to the tenderness and the gentleness of Jesus. I see maybe it's just the way my mind works. Maybe it's been around the church world for so long, but I've needed to probably get to that place where the kingdom does not advance in big ways that I think we've maybe thought that it normally is. And so when it comes to thinking about zeal, and when it comes to thinking about fervency, maybe we have an idea of what that looks like. But whenever we think about the kingdom, we've reflected on this before. It doesn't seem to advance in big ways. It comes quietly by healing hurting people. It comes quietly. Over and over again, we've seen that the kingdom comes. It's like bread that's just knead into the dough. It's like a little seed that is planted. It comes quietly. And we see the ministry of Jesus over and over again. We see that the kingdom does not come in big ways, but it comes quietly by healing hurting people. That is the pattern of the ministry of Jesus. It doesn't come in big ways, and even when we go back to those verses in Isaiah 42, that's what was prophesied about him. He'll not come shouting loudly, he'll not come making a big parade, but he'll come and gently heal the bruised reeds and not snuff out the smouldering wick. He won't call, the Message version says that he won't call attention to what he does with showy parades. I think if we had maybe this is unfair, but if I can't help it, I've started now. If we had a 21st century version paraphrase, he won't call attention to what he does with showy parades or with fancy social media stuff. There, I got it off my chest. I feel good now. Doesn't seem to be the way that he operates. It seems to be gentle and tender. Kingdom comes quietly. It advances as he heals hurting people. And I feel like I've just been grateful for this verse this week. So maybe as we come to this And I think there is another side to this. Hopefully there is a balance to this. So know that, I know there is times where we want like the G up. We want, come on, be zealous, be enthusiastic. Don't lose your enthusiasm. Galatians 6 verse 9 says that, like, don't lose your enthusiasm in doing good. Don't lose heart in doing good. Don't give up. In due time you'll reap a harvest. But I think there is other times we need to hear this, because maybe at times you think like you're a bruised reed. Where's your strength? Jesus doesn't come like that. He doesn't come to a bruised reed and says, come on, where's your strength? Where's your zeal? He comes in his gentleness and his tenderness. He doesn't come to the smouldering wick with any sense of frustration or anger and says, where did your fire go? It's not what he does. It's not his nature. And it's a bit of a go-to, maybe in times like this, Matthew 11, where Jesus talking about himself. So we have all of these other stories, but here's what Jesus actually says about himself. Come to me when you're weary. Come to me when you feel like you're a bruised reed. Come when you feel like you're a smoking wick. Come to me and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. And here's what he says about himself. I am gentle. I am gentle and humble in heart, and you'll find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. I'm glad that the guys, Nev said about the guys coming to do another song, because I'd love us just to reflect on this. I'd love as much as anything that in this moment, wherever you are, whatever's going on in your heart and your mind, however you feel about where your faith is even at, I'm encouraging you and pleading with you, bring your flickering faith to the tenderness of Jesus. And I'd love that we just have the opportunity to do that in these few minutes before the kids come back, before we go and start into all of the other things that are maybe beginning to sneak into our heads as we come to the end. Just in a few moments, even in your what feels like maybe a little bit of belief, that's enough. Bring it. Feels like the last strands of faith and hope. Bring it to the tenderness of Jesus. And there's something about his wounded hands being placed in our broken woundedness, that is where healing begins. That always has seemed to be the way of Jesus. And I think it continues to be the way of Jesus. And so I don't know how that's going to look for you, but allow him to do that. If that means just standing and worshipping and praying, or if it means going to somebody and say, like, just pray for me. Pray that prayer for me. Help, I believe, but help me in my unbelief. If you need to do that, do that. But whatever that's going to look like for you, just take advantage of these last few moments of worship and coming to the tenderness and the gentleness of Jesus.